There's a kind of quiet that scares people until they finally understand it. It's the moment your phone stops controlling your emotions, when unanswered messages don't ruin your day, when dates pass without dread, and your mind is no longer crowded with voices that took up space but never truly showed up for you. This quiet isn't emptiness. It's relief. It's the peace you didn't know you were missing because you were too busy trying to stay connected to people who only knew how to take. You didn't wake up one day and decide to walk away. You got there slowly, through exhaustion, disappointment, and a series of small realizations that kept stacking up until the version of you built to please everyone else finally collapsed. And when it did, you were still standing, alone. And for the first time, you understood something most people never do. Alone doesn't mean lonely. It means free. This is the real psychology behind cutting everyone off. It's not an act of anger. It's an act of archaeology. It's the careful, painstaking excavation of your own self from beneath the rubble of other people's expectations, their convenient needs, their conditional affection. People will look at you and see a finished sculpture, cold, hard, impenetrable marble. What they don't see are the thousands of tiny hammer taps it took to chip away everything that wasn't you. They see the absence of others and call it isolation. You feel the absence of pressure and call it breath. Let's be clear. You didn't start as the person who leaves. You started as the person who stays. You were the anchor, the reliable one, the one who drove through the night, who remembered the anniversaries of other people's pain, who knew how everyone took their coffee and their comfort. You were the living, breathing safety net, stretched so thin beneath everyone else that you floated on nothing but the hope that someone would notice you were falling too. You built your identity on being needed, mistaking utility for love, mistaking presence for partnership. Your worth was a currency you spent on others, waiting for a return investment that never, ever came. You were a bank giving out loans to people with no intention of ever paying back. And you called this friendship. You called this love. Then came your winter, your own private crisis, the moment the world cracked open for you, and you found yourself standing in the shards, bleeding out a quiet despair. This was the test you never agreed to take. And in that raw, desperate moment, you did the unthinkable. You reached out. You whispered your "help me" into the phones of those you'd always caught. You sent that fragile, trembling text. You made that call, your voice a fragile thread. And what came back wasn't a hand. It was an echo, a void, a thinking of you text that felt like a paper towel offered to a hemorrhage. A "let's talk soon" that stretched into a forever of silence. A chorus of "I'm so busy right now" that translated perfectly into a single devastating truth. You are on your own. That moment wasn't just a disappointment. It was a revelation, a tectonic shift in the bedrock of your understanding. In the silence that followed their non-response, you heard the unspoken truth of every relationship you'd ever nurtured. You were the emotional laborer in a field where you were the only one working well. The equation you'd been trying not to see suddenly flashed in bright, undeniable numbers. The math of you was devastating. You were pouring from an empty cup into bottomless pits. And you finally put the pitcher down. The pulling back wasn't dramatic. There was no grand manifesto, no fiery bridge burning. It was a quiet retreat, a gentle folding of your hands in your lap. It was the "I'm busy" that was no longer a lie, but a sacred boundary. It was the text you didn't double text. It was the invitation you declined without a fabricated excuse. It was the slow, steady process of becoming a ghost in the lives of people who had only ever loved your usefulness. And of course, they noticed. When the giving stops, the takers always notice. The invitations dried up. The check-in texts ceased. The space you left behind was filled, not with concern, but with gossip. "You've changed," they said, their voices laced with accusation. "You're so cold now. What happened to you?" They longed for the return of the old you, the compliant you, the convenient you, the you that asked for nothing and gave everything. They didn't understand that the old you didn't leave. The old you was sacrificed on the altar of their apathy. That person didn't walk away. They simply crumbled from the inside out. And from those ashes, this new, quieter version had to crawl out alone. This is where the world misunderstands you completely. They diagnose you with fear of intimacy, with walls, with cynicism. They don't see the history. Your nervous system, that ancient, wise part of you, learned a brutal lesson long before your mind could articulate it. It learned pattern recognition. Every time you trusted, you were left holding the bag of your own shattered heart. Every time you were vulnerable, that vulnerability was later used as a map to your weakest points. The friend who vanished when your smile did. The partner who loved the highlight reel but left during the behind-the-scenes struggle. The family whose love was a seasonal decoration, brought out for appearances and packed away when real life got messy. Your brain, in its fierce drive to protect you, started seeing the ending in the beginning. You'd meet someone new, feel that spark of connection, and a calm, cold voice in the back of your mind would whisper, "How will they leave?" It wasn't pessimism. It was prophecy, written from the data of 1,000 small betrayals. So you began to control the only variable you could, the exit. If abandonment is inevitable, you will be the architect of your own departure. You will leave first, cleanly, quietly. It hurts less when you're holding the scissors. People call it self-sabotage. You know it as self-preservation. It's the ultimate act of agency in a life that has taught you that you are powerless over the comings and goings of others. There is no explosive fight, no tearful list of grievances. The end is a quiet suffocation. It's texts left on read for days that stretch into eternities. It's a move to a new city where the address is a secret. It's the deletion of social media accounts without a farewell post. It's the slow, graceful fade into a life they cannot access. You don't give them a chance to ask you to stay because you already know the answer wouldn't be the one you need. And then comes the most surprising part. The peace. The terrifying scenarios you braced for, the solo holidays, the silent birthdays, handling emergencies with your own two shaking hands. They don't feel like devastation. They feel like integrity. The quiet you once feared has become your sanctuary. In this silence, there are no broken promises echoing, no waiting, no performing. You expected a desert, but you found solid ground. This is the great, unspoken reward, the exquisite relief of no longer bracing for impact. The energy you once spent on anxiously monitoring relationships, on twisting yourself into shapes to fit, on healing the paper cuts of constant micro-neglect. That energy returns to you. It becomes the fuel for your own life. You read the books, you take the walks, you build the career, you sit in the sun and simply exist, without a script. To understand this fully, you must look further back. This pattern is not an adult invention. Its roots are buried in the soft soil of childhood. Perhaps you had a parent who was a phantom in the next room, physically present, emotionally galaxies away. Maybe love was a transaction, dispensed in exchange for good grades or good behavior, or a quiet compliance that made you invisible. Maybe you were the child who learned, precociously, that your big feelings were an inconvenience, that tears were met with annoyance, not comfort, that a story about your day was interrupted by a glowing screen. You learned, deep in your forming brain, a foundational lesson. Need is a liability. To depend is to hand someone a weapon. Connection is the prelude to loss. So you adapted. You became the little adult. The child who packed their own lunch, who solved their own problems, who celebrated their own victories in the quiet of their room. You became a master analyst of moods, a curator of atmospheres, learning to make yourself small, pleasant, and unobtrusive. You didn't choose independence. It was thrust upon you as a survival suit. That childhood blueprint became the map for every relationship to follow. You unconsciously sought out the familiar heat of distant suns, repeating the pattern, hoping for a different outcome, but always proving the core belief. Eventually, you will be alone. Eventually, you will need, and they will not come. The accusations from others sting because they contain a sliver of truth wrapped in a mountain of misunderstanding. You don't let people in. Oh, but you have. You have pried your own ribs open again and again, offering your heart on a platter to people who picked it up, said, "Interesting," and put it down. You have forced yourself to be vulnerable, to trust, to believe this time will be different. And each time, the ending was a hauntingly familiar rerun. The friend who ghosted when the conversation got real. The partner who praised your strength but fled your fragility. The crushing specificity of the 2 a.m. text that was read and ignored. The "can I call you right back?" that became a lifetime of waiting. You remember showing up for their midnights, for their crises, for their mundane tragedies. And when your midnight came, suddenly everyone had a prior engagement with their own life. So you stopped. Not because you were broken, but because you were finally whole enough to listen to your own survival instincts. Your nervous system has been screaming in a frequency only you can hear. This costs too much. And you finally paid attention. You started auditing your emotional finances, and the statements were bankrupt. You were spending priceless energy on relationships that yielded returns of hollow validation and occasional companionship. You were in a one-sided performance, and the audience had long since left the theater. People who have never run this deficit cannot understand. They see you choosing physical isolation and pity you. They don't comprehend that for you, isolation isn't the opposite of connection. It is the ceasefire in a war you never wanted to fight. It is the one place where you cannot be abandoned, because you have finally stopped inviting people to the departure gate. You have, unwillingly, become a scholar of abandonment. You can spot the patterns in a first conversation. You see the person who only calls when they need a witness to their drama. You recognize the fair-weather friend, present for laughter, absent for tears. You feel the transactional weight in your bones, that familiar, weary sense of keeping a score you wish you could forget. You see the slow fade coming from miles away, the delayed replies, the superficial chatter replacing deep talk. The "we should catch up" that is a polite synonym for goodbye. You've seen this movie a dozen times. You know every beat of the plot. So now, at the first sign of the familiar soundtrack, the first canceled plan with a weak excuse, the first distracted look in their eye when you speak, you quietly step out of the theater. You stop initiating. You pull your energy back into yourself, a turtle retreating into a shell that has finally grown strong enough to protect you. And you watch, almost scientifically, to see if they will lean in to close the gap. They rarely do. That silence is your answer. That absence of effort is your closure. This is not giving up on people. This is giving up on the performance of people-pleasing. It is giving up on accepting breadcrumbs and calling it a banquet. It is giving up on the exhausting delusion that if you just love harder, give more, become smaller, you will finally earn the love that should have been given freely. You are not severing ties out of bitterness. You are severing the cords that were tethering you to a sinking ship. People will say you've built walls. The truth is, you've simply stopped laying out welcome mats on a battlefield. What looks like a fortification from the outside is, from within, the first safe space you've ever known. The loneliest you have ever been was not in this chosen quiet. It was in the roaring heart of a crowd where you felt utterly invisible. It was in a marriage where you slept next to a stranger. It was speaking your truth into a circle of friends and watching your words fall to the floor, unheard. The physical solitude you have now didn't create loneliness. It simply stopped pretending the loneliness wasn't already there. It honored it. It made space for it to finally heal. Sometimes you'll scroll through old photos, pictures of parties, group trips, smiling faces pressed together. You don't feel a pang for those people. You feel a deep, sorrowful tenderness you had in that picture. The you who still believed in the story. The you who hadn't yet learned that some people will hold your heart like a forgotten stone in their pocket, unaware of its weight until they empty their hands and let it drop. That version of you was drowning in the giving. You didn't cut everyone off to run away. You swam to shore to save yourself. Maybe, one day, the drawbridge will lower again. Maybe you will meet a traveler who approaches not with demands, but with curiosity. Someone who doesn't try to scale your walls but sits quietly outside them, respecting their purpose, until you feel safe enough to open a door. But that day is not today. Today, you are in the gentle business of healing, of tending to the small, fragile flame of your own spirit that almost guttered out in the winds of other people's indifference. You are protecting it, not out of fear, but out of profound respect, because you now know that your peace is not a commodity to be traded. Your energy is not a public resource. Your heart is not a timeshare. Cutting everyone off is not an act of lack. It is an act of profound reverence for the self that survived, for the peace that was earned, for the truth that was finally faced. It is the ultimate declaration. I would rather be whole and alone than shattered and surrounded. They may whisper about you. They may call you a cautionary tale. Let them. You are the author of your own story now. And this chapter of quiet is not an ending. It is the necessary, fertile ground from which everything that comes next, authentic, chosen, and true, will finally have the space to grow.